The Formula One world didn't expect this kind of disruption. No crash, no penalty, no public outburst. Just one document that changed everything. A file, not meant for Lewis Hamilton's eyes, somehow reached his hands. A 42-page internal document, silent, technical and confidential, became the spark behind whispers in the paddock. What was inside? Some thought it exposed hidden flaws in a yet-to-be-released car. But the truth was something much more uncomfortable. Everything looked perfect on the surface when Hamilton's move to Ferrari was announced. Headlines screamed history being made. Fans were thrilled. A global icon switching to motorsport's most legendary badge, it was presented as a match meant to restore pride and performance. Two world-class drivers under one roof, working toward one common goal. That's what the press releases said. But behind those glossy photos and polished statements, the atmosphere was far less ideal. Away from the cameras, a quiet strategy was taking shape, one that didn't match the public image. Hamilton, hailed as the team's future, was slowly being edged away from the center. And the document? It didn't accuse anyone of direct foul play. There were no missing bolts, no reckless changes. What it did show was far more subtle. Inside were notes only seasoned professionals could truly understand. Technical outlines, engineering preferences, team setups, all written in cold, dry language. On the surface, none of it seemed strange. But reading between the lines, Hamilton noticed something. These plans weren't made with him in mind. They weren't meant to support him. In fact, they showed a silent method of reducing his influence, bit by bit. Quiet shifts in decision-making, priorities being rearranged, and authority quietly moving elsewhere. This wasn't sabotage the way movies show it. No outbursts or explosions. This was far more careful, more dangerous even. Because how do you call out something no one is openly doing? How do you protest changes that look harmless in isolation, but together lead somewhere very clear? Hamilton didn't need an expert to tell him. After years at the top of this sport, his instincts were sharp. He could feel it in the garage, in strategy calls, and in how small requests were handled. As the new season kicked off, something just didn't feel right to Hamilton. It wasn't about an obvious error or a sudden drop in performance. It was more like a string of small things, hard to spot but impossible to ignore. The balance of the car during simulator sessions felt unfamiliar. It didn't respond to his inputs the way he expected. It was as if the machine hadn't been tailored for him at all. When he asked for changes or tweaks to the setup, the answers were always vague. Still under review. Not yet finalized, or that's not available right now. The pattern repeated itself. Meanwhile, across the garage, Charles Leclerc seemed to be sailing smoothly. Everything he asked for was acted on without delay. He had access to the latest test components, real-time data, and quick adjustments. His side of the team looked well-oiled. No delays, no confusion, just smooth execution. The difference was growing, and it was becoming hard not to notice. Hamilton, known for being low-maintenance and focused, wasn't asking for miracles. But even his reasonable requests were often pushed aside with friendly yet hollow replies. We'll look at it later had become the standard line, except that later never really came. What started as a subtle gap now stood out. Leclerc's group looked tighter. The vibe around him felt familiar, even personal. Most of the engineers and staff had worked with him since his early days. They shared a shorthand, spoke in clipped technical phrases only they understood, and made decisions quickly. It wasn't just teamwork. It was a closed circle. For Hamilton, this wasn't just a different working style. It was a quiet warning. It told him where the real trust and priority lay. It showed him that access and influence were being carefully measured and limited. And the most worrying part? This shift wasn't being talked about. It was just happening, little by little. It became clearer with every race weekend. Whenever Hamilton pushed for something specific, be it a tire setup or a brake calibration, the responses remained polished but empty. Adjustments were delayed, feedback was minimal, and requests were brushed aside with phrases that gave the illusion of action but delivered none. On the other side, Leclerc's garage continued operating like a finely tuned engine. He got everything he needed fast. Even the tiniest changes to his car, like aero tweaks or floor adjustments, were made without hesitation. Tools meant for testing, even those not fully approved for race conditions, were available to him. No stalling, no red tape. It was as if one side of the garage was in full gear, while the other was coasting in neutral. This contrast wasn't lost on anyone paying attention. Slowly, the gap in performance was no longer just a topic of speculation. It was visible in the lap times, the strategy calls, and even in the team radio. When Hamilton was in a strong position, the radio was quiet or filled with vague instructions. Keep the pace steady. Think about tire life, or let's play the long game. These messages might sound reasonable, but in a high-stakes race, they often meant one thing: don't push. Compare that with Leclerc, who was urged to attack without delay. Push now. You're free to go. Max pace. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. One driver was told to be careful. The other was given the green light. And it kept happening. Hamilton wasn't imagining things. These weren't emotional reactions. They were patterns, clear, consistent, and strategic. The small details were adding up. Slight brake bias changes here, a diffuser tweak there. Every one of them looked routine. But when Hamilton drove, the feel was off. The grip wasn't where he expected it. The response felt delayed. Something wasn't right. It reached a tipping point during a private testing session. Hamilton clocked an incredible time, one that stunned even the crew. Curious, he asked to review the telemetry data. He wanted to see what made that lap so clean. But the answer left him cold. The data? Gone. Still sinking. Being processed. Delayed. Every excuse except the truth. Days passed, but that missing data was never brought back. Each time Hamilton asked, the answer was wrapped in technical jargon or vague explanations. The session had been promising. His car felt alive, balanced, perfectly tuned. And yet, the proof of that performance had vanished. For a driver like Hamilton, who relies on data as much as instinct, that loss was not just frustrating, it was alarming. This wasn't just a case of a misplaced file or a forgotten upload. It felt deliberate. There was no transparency, no urgency, and certainly no apology. The silence around that lap time spoke louder than any telemetry could have. But the issue wasn't confined to the garage or the pit wall. The shift extended to how Hamilton was being portrayed publicly. After a few races, something began to change in the media coverage. The Italian press, which once celebrated his arrival at Ferrari like a second coming, slowly began focusing their attention elsewhere. Charles Leclerc, the younger driver, began to be talked about as the future of Ferrari. Hamilton's name was still respected. No doubt about that. But now he was being described differently. Words like mentor, veteran, and experienced hand were creeping into the headlines. He was being recast, not as the main threat on the track, but as a support figure, a guide for the next generation. It was subtle but calculated. The team's message was shifting, and the media was picking up on it. This wasn't about who was faster. It was about who the narrative was beginning to favor. And that narrative no longer had Hamilton as the lead. He wasn't fighting a single rival on the track anymore. He was up against a broader shift, one that touched everything from team decisions to public perception. The carefully managed brand of Ferrari was adjusting its spotlight, and it was beginning to leave Hamilton in the shadows. But Lewis wasn't giving up. He didn't lash out or throw accusations. Instead, he focused the only way a true champion does: with performance, with control, with quiet, unshakable resolve. As the 2025 season wore on, it became more than just a battle for podiums or lap times. It was a test of endurance, patience, and mental strength. Hamilton, who had faced and conquered countless challenges throughout his career, now found himself in a far more complex situation. This wasn't about a faulty gearbox or a slow pit stop. It was about a slow erasure, a quiet shift in priorities, where actions didn't match the words spoken in press conferences. Behind closed doors, Hamilton began pushing harder, not just on the track but in meetings. He started demanding detailed breakdowns, asking for justification behind technical decisions, and urging transparency in areas that had become increasingly clouded. He wasn't looking for special treatment. He simply wanted fairness, clarity, and to understand why his role in the team felt less central with each passing race. Still, the answers were half given, the timelines always vague. He noticed how internal meetings became shorter, less frequent for his side. Meanwhile, Charles Leclerc seemed to enjoy an open channel, quick updates, immediate follow-ups, and a familiar atmosphere that bred confidence. Hamilton was navigating an environment that felt more like politics than racing. And then came the turning point. Ferrari's long-term development roadmap was quietly presented. While the language was careful, the message was unmistakable. Charles was the cornerstone. The new design philosophy, the projected testing focus, the upgrade priorities, it all aligned with Leclerc's driving style, preferences, and strengths. Hamilton's input was mentioned, but almost as an afterthought. This wasn't outright rejection. It was a slow repositioning, a redirection of the spotlight. Yet Hamilton didn't choose to fight back with words or public confrontation. He did what he's always done best. He let his driving speak. Every qualifying lap, every defensive move, every second gained on a pit exit, it all became a quiet form of resistance. Not dramatic, but undeniable. He forced people to take notice. The question now isn't just whether Hamilton can win another title. The real story is whether he can redefine what it means to lead from the shadows, whether he can rewrite his legacy not through team loyalty, but through undeniable excellence under pressure. Ferrari may be writing a new script, but Lewis Hamilton is still holding the pen.